Good morning, everyone. We are ready to start this presentation. Apologies for starting a little bit late. You may have seen the screen flicker a little bit with different slides and applications. This is just testing and making sure the system works. So I would like to welcome you to this Sol-Tec webinar. Today we're going to talk about web apps, and we're going to talk about how you can migrate your WordPress and your internal websites to the cloud and what the benefits of that is. So my name is Lubin Kirov. I'm taking over from Paul today. I'm one of the cloud practice leads here. So my responsibility is really to help out with training, to go on site and help customers with any Azure queries. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, the very first one being is, we're going to talk about why should we use Azure. Then we're going to demo a WordPress site, and then we're going to finally do just a normal site with which is linked to GitHub to show you how cool you can integrate your dev tools into it as well. So where does your journey begin? Well, with some clients, it begins with infrastructure as a service. With others, it really begins with web applications. So the really cool thing about web applications is that you can easily and quickly host your WordPress sites, your PHP sites, your internal sites into the cloud. Now you can make those publicly available, you can secure them, you can develop them, all from the comfort of just one portal. Web apps are very flexible. Web apps are designed to be cost effective, and because Microsoft looks after the underlying infrastructure for web apps, it means that you always have the latest protection, you always have the latest security, and you always have the latest innovations. So web apps over the last few years have had hundreds of updates, including things like getting a certificate, including things like registering your DNS and automatically renewing those, meaning that administrators and IT staff have less things to do and just put it as an automation piece. So the very first thing we're going to do today is we're going to look at hosting a WordPress site into web apps, and I'll give you all the advantages and how they operate. We've seen a lot of customers move into web apps, whether it's hosting their external website or hosting a WordPress site for their colleagues and securing it in a way so that only they can access it. So if we go into the portal, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at our web apps. So all web apps start with a service plan. So app service plan is basically your underlying infrastructure that Microsoft manages, and it's how big your environment is going to be. So if we just go in, I've already created one, but we're going to go over some of the steps on how you create them as well. So it's very easy to create app service plans. This is the part of the Azure that actually costs you something, and this is where you actually set out how much it's going to cost you. So the service plans come in a number of different flavors, so you'll be able to choose between Windows and Linux, depending on what your experience is. Windows tends to be more for .NET and Java-based applications, whereas Linux is more for PHP. Both will run the majority of software out there. It just depends whether or not you want to pay for Windows or Linux licenses. In terms of locations, web apps are available all over the world. When we're talking to you guys, most of the things we see is that people will go for West Europe, North Europe, or UK South and UK West because of Brexit. It's a great way for you to actually choose where your application is going to be hosted, because you can make sure that any regulations around data and sovereignty are actually applied to your website. And then finally, you'll be able to choose the flavor of your web app. So this is really the component that costs you money. This is the stuff that we look at and go, okay, how much is this actually going to cost me a month? And depending on your application needs, you can decide how big and how many applications you actually want to run. So you can start off with a free tier. They're very basic. They're just for testing out. Any production workloads should go into the standard tier. That comes with backup. It comes with the ability to be able to hook into MySQL, SQL, Postgres, or any other databases you may need. And one of the things we're going to do today is we're going to spin up WordPress, and we're going to put WordPress and MySQL inside a single service app plan. Now, in the majority of cases, when we tend to use service plans, we want that to be separate, make sure high availability. But for cost savings and just for a demo example, I want to show you how you can actually operate your whole website inside one single box. What we see with majority of clients is when they start to use web apps, they'll have multiple servers running in the background, and Azure will automatically take care of that for you. And those multiple servers will connect to a SQL farm or a MySQL farm to make sure that that's scalable. And I'll show you how we can do that. So we've already created a service plan for you. It's called my Azure Web App Plan. It's nothing special. It's just a single plan, and I've kind of gone for one of the lower tiers. So we've gone for just the standard tier, which is costing us £33 a month. So what we can with service plans is, because this is your underlying infrastructure, this is the stuff that will do all the processing. This is the stuff that will do all the hosting. So you have to be very careful when you choose things here, because this is the financial impact to your organization. When it comes to web apps, we also have the ability to auto scale them. So this is something that you don't really have on premise, or it's very rare when we see it. Auto scaling is a great feature to make sure that you meet your demand at low cost. So what I can do is I can enable auto scaling over here, and I can choose how many instances I want to go up in and what's the maximum amount of instances I want to run. So as we increase instances, we obviously increase costs. So that £33 we saw a second ago, that will become 66 if it was 2, and so on and so on. The great thing about this is, because we can create these scaling rules based on CPU usage, it means that the majority of the time your web app can actually run with just a single server at the background. But if you get once a month or twice a month, or maybe a few times a week, a lot of traffic, it can go up to 10, 20, or however many servers you need. It just means that you'll be able to do a lot of cost saving, because you pay £33 for the majority of the time, and when it bursts, you pay the few pounds of the extra instances. Now, those are charged per minute, so it's not a problem. So it doesn't mean that when you spin up 10 instances, you instantly pay £300. No, it's not like that. It's actually measured by minute, which is great. The rules you can create here are quite cool, because we can do a lot of metrics, whether it's CPU, memory, disk queues, whatever your application needs are. And we can create rules for both increasing and decreasing the count. So I can have a rule that says, as memory goes up, spin up more machines. And I can have another rule that says, well, no servers are no longer utilized, let's shut them down and go back to 1 or 2 instances. So if you want to have high availability, you always run 2 instances. But for this test, we're just going to run 1 instance at a time. So we've got our app service plan. It just means that now we will be able to actually put websites onto it. And the very first thing we're going to do today is we're going to spin up WordPress. Now, there's a number of ways of doing that. A single service plan can run multiple websites. And one of the examples I wanted to show you is that I've got actually 3 sites running on my one app service plan. So they share the memory, they share the disk usage, and we can see that easily by just going into the here. And you'll be able to see, so you can see that I'm using a number of slots. It's using up some of my memory. It's actually gone down a little bit. We've got some CPU usage, and from here we can actually see all the resource consumptions as well. So if we have a quick look at the file system storage, you can see that out of the 50 gig available, I've used up 312 megabytes. Now, one of the awesome features about web apps is that when I publish something to a single server, if it auto scales, it automatically take my code and it'll republish it onto the new server. So I never have to worry about this. From my perspective, it's let me build my website, and Azure will take care of the scaling. Azure will take care of the hard work at the background. So as you can see, I've got, in reality, I've got 2 web apps. So I've got one that's WordPress, one which is a standard HTML page with some images, and I've got a dev slot, which we'll go into in a second. So how do we spin WordPress? I mean, it's very easy in Azure. We go to the marketplace and we say, you know what, I want a WordPress server. And you can see that it can run on Linux or Windows. So if I go into WordPress and I go create, it automatically allow me to choose my domain name. So if you're using your own domain names, you can point to it later on. I can choose which subscription I want it in, which resource group, and then I can choose whether my database is hosted in MySQL or MySQL inside the service plan. At the moment, we've hosted MySQL inside the service plan just for a demo. In reality, you want to create your own MySQL cluster. That does come with an extra cost, but it means that if you've got multiple servers running your website, they'll be able to have the high availability in the instance counts you need. Inside a single MySQL app, it's not recommended for productions, because if we stop the single instance running this, or if it crashes, the website goes down. For test purposes, we're just going to use that for the moment. We have enabled application insights, which is a great feature of web apps. It makes sure that it gives you a lot of analytical details, something like Google Analytics, where it tells you about errors, user stories, how they interact with your website. So it's a great way to actually look into your website. So I've already spun up our WordPress site. So when you click next, it'll take about 5 minutes to generate the code and spin up the website. And then once up and running, you'll be able to hook it up to MySQL. So if we just open that up, one of the things you'll notice straight away is that it's taking me to login.microsoftonline.com. Now, I've decided that my WordPress is an internal only site, and I don't want to make it available to the outside world, for example. So what I can do is I can come in here and say, you know what? I know WordPress has its own authentication, but I want to integrate with that with Active Directory or Facebook or something else like that. So what I can do is I can go into authentication or authorization, and I can just turn it on. So at the moment, what I've done is I've said that anyone inside my Azure Active Directory, so this is my organization, can access my WordPress, and anyone else can't. And this is where it gets really cool, because this is actually outside of your application. So it doesn't matter what you host inside the web app. This is before you actually hit it. So it doesn't rely on your application. It means you can do legacy applications. It means you can do futuristic applications. It can send data back to your app as well. So if your developers want to utilize that, they can actually pick out the user email, the user data, and actually input it into your app as well. You've got a number of choices, from Facebook to Google to Microsoft accounts. The majority of people use Azure Active Directory because the applications are really for their users. Otherwise, you always leave it to anonymous and you wouldn't have to turn this on. So I'm going to click accept, because I'm allowing this website to actually view my username, well, not password, view my username and email if I wanted to interact with it. And you can see that it's actually loading our WordPress site. Now, one of the other great features is, by default, when you spin up a web app, it automatically comes up with a certificate. It is a Microsoft certificate, but nonetheless, it's a valid certificate that you get automatically part of your package. It is something you can change as well. So one of the cool things is, if I don't like my name, for example, Sol-Tec my press, AzureWebsites.net, maybe I don't like that very much. Maybe I want to use my custom domain, which is what most people do. I can easily go into my web apps and go, you know what, I'm going to use my custom domain. And I'm going to point it over here, and I'm going to add HTTPS, and I'm going to add a certificate to it as well. So now I'm hosting this website with my own DNS and my own name. Azure has taken that one step further. They've said, well, if you don't have a domain, you can actually buy it from us. And this is an awesome feature for web apps, because it gives me the ability to come in here, and if I don't own a domain, choose it and buy it. And I can do auto renewals of this as well. So it means that it never expires. I never have to worry about it. I never have to go to GoDaddy or a third-party website and remember that I have to go in and do this. It's same for Ssl certificates as well. So if you wanted to bring your own certificates, you can do that, and you can import it and use it, or you can use the Azure provided certification. So again, this has the advantage of, I can buy it through the portal. It costs about £50, I believe, for a whole year, and I can tick an auto renew box. You know, one of the biggest problems and flaws that all IT staff around the world faces, they forget to renew a certificate, or they have to have a system that tells them that they're going to expire. They have to go in, they have to renew the certificate. It may only take an hour or so, but that's an hour of your time you can save. If I enable this and I tick the little box that says auto renew, I never have to, worry about this. It'll send me an email saying, oh, it's going to auto renew if you don't do anything. If you want to cancel it, you can do so as well. So this is an awesome feature that's been provided by Microsoft. It is something that we see more and more customers use, because they can use the domain names in here, they can use the Ssl certificates in here, and of course they can auto scale things out as well, which is awesome. So you've got automatic scaling, you've got automatic certifications, you got automatic DNS as well. So what are you actually doing? You're not doing anything. The website is actually managing itself. It's cost saving, because it makes sure that, if you have more people, it will scale up. If you don't, it will scale down and cost you the least amount of money. So this is a really cool thing to do and to have. And one of the things I really wanted to go over with you today is explain some of the other cool features that are built into this so you can understand how things work. Before we move on to the other app and show you all the other features you see on the screen here, I just wanted to focus on one more thing. Web apps come with extensions as well. So extensions are things that you add on to your web apps. And one of the cool things we can do is we can install some of the services you may use already. For example, we know that WordPress uses MySQL, and MySQL requires an interface sometimes to be managed. PHPMyAdmin is a great tool to do that, and I can just add it as an extension, and from there I can just browse to my site, and it will open my Word site. It will authenticate with my account. I don't have to worry about security or anything else. That's already secured and that's already configured. So in about 5 minutes, I've managed to set up a MySQL server, I've managed to publish a WordPress site, and I've managed to set up PHPMyAdmin, something that would have taken probably a couple of hours on premise and a lot of fiddling about. I've also gained the ability to have automatic certificates, DNSs, and auto scaling. So as you can see, we can see that our database and our WordPress is already here, and there's already posts about it because we can actually see that it's running in the background. So we can see it over here. So that's WordPress. I just wanted to show how quickly it is. It's just basically 3 clicks. What I want to really concentrate on is the other application, because that's the really cool stuff. And this of apologies, everyone. We seem to have had an internet dropout for a second. It's okay, we're back. So one of the cool things you can do is you can have multiple websites running on your app service plan. You can have as many as you want in reality. The only thing you need to be wary of is, oh, and I need to refresh the page. Apologies, this is what happens when your connection dies for a second. Okay, we're back. So as I was trying to say, we can have multiple websites hosted on the app service plan, which is great. So the only thing you need to be wary of is obviously if you've set your app service plan to have 3 GB of RAM, that is shared amongst all the websites that are running. And it's important to know that because I can actually go in and I can stop certain websites from running. For example, the WordPress site we've just created. Just give it a second to load. I can actually restart it. I can stop it. I can start it. I can do whatever I want with it. So it also gives me the flexibility of testing, let's say over the weekend, and then stopping my websites. So when I stop my website, obviously the app service plan is still running in the background. That's still incurring charges, but now this website is no longer using my memory. So it's freed up and I can use it on my other sites, so it doesn't have to share. So the second app we're going to look into today and how you can publish things is a simple HTML application. So this is a cool little application I've just rolled up. It's basically an index page with an image on it. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to show you how flexible and how cool this is for development. So I've built myself a blank app, as you can see here. I can go into my application settings and I can choose what kind of environments I want this to run on. And you are free, as I said, to use. You can use .NET frameworks, we can use PHP, we can use Python, we can use Java. That's quite a lot of stuff. We can choose what kind of platform do we want, 32-bit, 64-bit. We can enable things like WebSockets. Always on is an awesome feature. So this makes sure that your website is loaded and refreshed all the time. What happens on premise sometimes, you leave a site not running for a while, ISS puts it to sleep. Takes a long time for the next person to load up the page. With always on, you never have that problem because there's something always in the background making sure, no, don't go into sleep, don't go into sleep. You can also choose HTTP versions, so you can have HTTP 1, you can have HTTP 2, there's cookies, there's auto swaps, and all other cool features. All web apps come with FTP as well, and you can disable it if you want. If you're more traditional and you want to be able to upload your site via FTP, FTP, you can't do so. So think of a web app as basically an IIS site. You create it, you go through FTP, you copy your content in there, it's done, it's up and running. You can also have debugging, and you can also have application settings and connection settings. So these are really cool and important things you can do. And as an IT admin, this gives you the ability to remove, let's say, security holes from giving your developers username and passwords they shouldn't know. So I can come in here and I can set up my database connection policies. I can set up my data connection username and passwords and never give them out to my developers. All I'm going to tell to my developers is, if you want to use this, this gets pushed onto the website in the web config, just utilize this variable. So I set the username and passwords, they don't know what they are, but they can use them and they can test things in here. The other cool thing is we can do this as a slot setting. So it means that I can set up one database to be my production. I can set a different setting for my dev environment, making sure that my developers, when they're testing things, they never have the ability to go in here and accidentally wipe out production. Which leads us to our next point. One of the other great things about web apps is deployment slots. So with web apps, we can actually create multiple deployment slots. For this one, I've got a primary deployment slot, and I also have a development deployment slot. So you'll see in the portal, there's some preview and classical bracket stuff. This is because the web apps are getting upgraded. Very soon, the classical versions of the portal will be gone, and you'll have just the new features. As you can see, we've got our production slot here, and then we've got our development slots. So if we go and view our website really quickly, just to show you what that looks like, I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to click on Browse. And as I said, it's not a complex website. It's basically just an image. Now, this is my production website. It's running fine. My developers have come in. They've tested a new version in our development slot, and they've gone, well, it's ready. We're happy to do it. Now, we've got two choices here. We can either gradually swap to it, so you can actually define how much of the traffic goes to the development side if you really wanted to test it with live users, or we can swap them. And this is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to say, you know what? Our development version is ready. So I'm going to take my development version and I'm going to put it into my production version. It does tell me if there's any settings that is going to swap, and I'm going to click swap. And the great thing about this is now that my development version is going to go into production. It's only going to take a few seconds. If you have multiple servers, so multiple instance count, it will do one at a time. So from a user perspective, they'll never really see this as any downtime. And now that I've said that we're doing it very quickly, it's going to take a few seconds longer. This is something that's been very rare on premise, swapping production and live with a single click. What it does in the background, it actually takes all your development code that you've published via FTP, and it swaps it with all the production code we've put into production. And there it's done. So if I go and refresh my site, ta-da! It's a new version, it's a new picture. So now we're running the new version of the site. So from a development and IT perspective, it's that easy. If I've messed up, I can swap them again. You know, I can make sure that, oh, hold on, what happened then? I've got a different development slot. I can roll back to a previous version. And you can do previews as well to make sure that it runs correctly and everything is running before you actually do the swap. The other cool thing about web apps, apart from the deployment slots, is the ability to do multiple ways of deployment. So this is really cool, and I'm going to show you both views so you can have an idea of all the available resources. So if we have a quick look at, apologies for this, it's not where I wanted to click. We'll go back to deployments. Oh, sorry. This is the application. So one of the cool things about this is we can actually link it to a number of different deployment technologies, so you can do continuous integration. So for developers out there, you can really hit the ground running. So at the moment, what I've done is I've linked our website to GitHub, but I can link it to other things as well. I can link it to OneDrive, I can link it to Visual Studio, I can link it to my own private repository, whatever I need. Yeah, and the other cool thing about this is that I can actually publish code to GitHub and that will make a change. And I'm going to show you that right now. So if we go into our deployment slots, let's pretend we're a developer. We've decided that, you know what, I'm going to test out a new setting. And this is the other cool thing about deployment slot is every deployment slot comes with its own little link. So as a developer, I can go and check what my current development looks like. And obviously this is the picture we loaded a second ago because it's the one we've swapped. I say, oh, that's pretty cool. You know, we've got a picture, it's there, it's working really well. I can see that it's on my deployment slot, it's on my live slot. And if I check my deployment center, I can monitor whether or not this is actually syncing. And you can see that this is syncing to prod at the moment. Because we swapped them, it means that our previous deployment slot is now syncing to dev, for example, as well. So that gives you a quick way of actually doing things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say, you know what? I like this image that we've just published, that we've just seen. It's kind of cool, but I want to swap it. So I'm going to take a new image. I'm going to put it in my application as a developer. And I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to commit this now. I've made my change. I like my change, and I want to test it. And I'm going to go into publishing, and I'm going to push it. And because we're using the dev slot at the moment, I'm going to push it that. And just give me a second. So this is now going to GitHub. It's going to ask me for some username and passwords. Okay. Oh, sorry. Seems like I've typed my password a little bit too quickly there. So let me push it up again. And this has nothing to do with Azure. This is just me using GitHub. It does this sometimes. And it's going to ask me one more time. There are much easier ways of doing this. I've used too much security on this, and that's why we're having a problem at the moment. And done. Okay. So I've made changes to my code. I've pushed my code up. That's gone to GitHub. So if we go and open up GitHub, just to show you what that looks like. In my GitHub, I've created this cool little website, which I'm just going to view. If you just give me a second. My web app, so it's got a master branch, it's got a development branch in there, and I've just pushed on to our development branch, the new version, which should be a couple of minutes ago. Yep, 2 minutes ago, we've changed the image. So if we go back to our lovely deployment center, changes get tracked straight away and committed straight away. So we will be able to actually see our website change as we do live. You can also decide that you're going to do something else. So if we go back to our development website, where because we're doing actually development, it's not going to publish to production at the moment. We chose our development side. If we go back to our deployment center, we'll just give it a second to load. You can see that, oh, it's noticed there's a new commit. So it's actually taken the new commit. So if I go into my development website now, which we have over here, and I refresh that, oh, it's a very big image of a meerkat. So once you link this and once you get this up and running, you no longer have to give access to developers to do anything. In reality, you give them a link and you say, anything you publish in your code, Azure will automatically go pick that up and publish it for you. And they can decide whether they want to choose to deploy to dev or to master. Of course, you're not forced to actually pick up your live site. On your live site, you can say, you know what, I'm not going to allow you to publish just in case you don't make any, make mistakes. What I'll allow you to do is you into dev, and you can actually publish in dev, and you can test it out in dev, which is going to be awesome. And when you're ready, you can come and tell me about it, and I'm going to swap them around. So this is a security measure you can actually add to yourself. And the cool thing about it is, as I create more and more deployment slots, I can give different people access to them. So each individual slot, think of it as an individual container and an individual website. So I can come in and say, well, you know what? I may have John as a colleague, and John needs access to this so he can control it. I don't want to give access to John to my production side. So I can come in here and give John only access to this development slot. So if I have 20 developers, I'm paying £30 a month, and each one of them can have, for example, a deployment slot, which is really cool. So suddenly all my developers have their own little repositories where they can update things. I can link each and every one of them to a different branch. So John can have a branch, Michael can have a branch, Leuven can have a branch, everyone can have a branch. And that will go to the individual websites. So those slot-specific settings come into their own when you start using this. Something that you'll be able to start using in the future, especially when you start using .NET. So our application is a very simple one, which just uses images. But if you start using .NET a lot more, you can start utilizing some of the other cool features in web apps, like managed service identities. So think of these as service accounts. So I can set this up, and I can allow SQL to be accessed through this account. Now I no longer need to put any username and passwords in my app config. Now my application has become 100 times more secure. What Azure does in the background is it creates a special account. You give that special account and manages the certificates and passwords. If a hacker comes in, he will never be able to see those username and passwords. He will be never able to see the config. The other cool things we can do is we can enable, obviously, backup. So, and there's a number of ways if we can do that. So if I go back to my production site at the moment, and I go into my backup slot, you can see that I've actually backed up my website to a storage account. And I've set it to back up once a day. I can back it up now and I can restore it. So if something's gone completely wrong and my production site has gone wrong and I can't roll it back, I can always come back from backup. As you go into more and more expensive plans, other snapshots become in preview as well. So snapshots, those are every second. Think of them as just-in-time snapshots. And the backup stuff, we can actually go and include, and we can say, you know what? I'm going to configure it, and I'm going to back up my SQL stuff as well through this, or my SQL stuff, or SQL, or Postgres, really. So you can actually, if there is a database connection, use this to make sure that when you snapshot your website, you can take a backup of your data as well. So really useful feature, really good, all out of the box. So for this, you're not actually paying anything extra. You're paying for the little bit of storage that you're just using on this server, which is peanuts compared to anything else. We did say that we can have custom domains in SSL. Some of the other cool things you can do is you can link your web app. So you can either link it to stuff in Azure, you can link it to a CDN, so you can actually push stuff to it. You can link it as a hybrid connection, which is really cool. So if you've got a very old web server or something your application needs to contact on premise, you can establish this connector. Now, this is a very secure connector, which does an outbound connection from your end. So you don't have to open up any ports. You don't have to make anything really unsecure. We can link it to virtual networks, as I said, in Azure, and you can add IP restrictions as well. So if you didn't want to put authentication in front of it for whatever reason, we can go in here and we can say, you know what, this application is only going to be accessible by one IP, and that might be your public office IP address. So you can do that. We did talk about the scale up and scaled out. What we haven't talked about yet is web jobs. So web jobs, think of it as scheduled tasks. The other cool thing you can do is whether it's routine maintenance or some processing in the background. So if we have an application where users can go in and purchase stuff, you can have a web job every hour that processes those orders. Maybe does some cool analytics, maybe make sure that the credit cards get built and then get sent to the dispatch team. So web jobs are scheduled tasks. They're automatic. So you can set them to run all the time. You can set them to run on a specific schedule. You get alerts if anything goes wrong. Push notifications are also built in, so you can actually link stuff to make sure that you go and send something off to a mobile phone. And as we said with the WordPress site, we have MySQL in the app. On this one, we don't, because this is just a simple HTML page. One of the other cool things we've enabled for our web app is application insights. So this is something extremely powerful and it's something you can actually use on-premise as well. Application insights gives a full overview of your application and what happens with it. You know, how many people are going to hit it, what's going to happen, are there any errors? And while the websites we've been looking at are very simple and there isn't going to be much to them, when you start using SQL, when you start using things like .NET, you get a lot more metrics out of them. So you can see that, you know, I've got response times, I've got failures, so I can check if something's gone wrong. If users keep complaining, I can actually see if that's a valid complaint. And you can see I've got some count, most likely it's to do with images. We can check our performance to make sure that our website is running at peak time. So, oh, the one's over here, most likely when I'm starting and stopping the websites. So application insights is extremely powerful. We're not going to have time to really look and dive deep into it today because that's probably a 4-hour session. It's got a lot of stuff to do. What I'm going to show you is one more awesome feature in web apps, and that's to do with performance tests. And this is something we ran on our application this morning. So something that developers always want to know is how well their websites performs under load. Well, Azure gives you a great tool for free, by the way, so you can test that. So I've got a performance test under here, and I've run it this morning, and I've said it, you know what? I've got my app in West Europe. I'm going to do a performance test from North Europe, and I'm going to simulate a 250 user load. And I can see from my performance data how that went in. And I can tell you that the website was running fine. This is when I installed WordPress this morning. And as you can see, the response time went up and then went back down to normal. So how quickly is it to set these up? You click new, and then you can just choose how many users you want, what the duration is, and of course, where you want to hit it from. So maybe you don't want to hit it from the same location. So basically, what web apps are. One of the cool things we can do with this is utilize some of the other tools we have available in Azure. So we can utilize things like Traffic Manager. So Traffic Manager is a DNS load balancing solution. It means that if I have 2 web apps, I can have one in West Europe, one in North Europe. Traffic Manager will load balance across regions. And you can have one in China, and you can have one, for example, in the US. And traffic managers can look at the IP addresses and go, okay, you're coming from China, go to the Chinese instance. And you can do that with CDNs as well. So one of the things we see quite a lot is, and one of the cool things you can do is, instead of actually loading all your images and your data on the web app itself, and maybe using up that server storage and that precious space, people tend to use Azure Storage accounts. Because storage accounts are quick and dirty and very nice to use, I can actually put all my images on here and make them publicly available. Once I do that, I can enable cool things like automatic CDN. So if I go in here, I can distribute and cache my resources all over the world. And Microsoft gives you quite a lot of choices when it comes to this matter. So you can go with one of the many providers they have. So you can do the Microsoft one, the version, the Akamai, or the premium Verizon one, and it's your choice. This is a very cheap and effective way of storing images and other data effectively. You can also obviously enable encryption and other cool things on it as well. So that's in terms of web apps and a quick overview of how they operate and how they work. There's a lot more to them. My recommendation is go build some test ones. There's a free tier as well. Test them out. You'll see that there's a lot of ways for you to connect it to. And while I've done GitHub, there's nothing stopping you from deploying it in a different classical manner. So if we have a quick look at this, because I just want to show you this one last thing. Oh, no, I've linked that one to GitHub as well. Apologies for it. I'll just double check something. Okay, so this one's linked to GitHub, but in reality, we can also FTP to it if we wanted to make sure that we actually publish it as we should. So the reason this is linked to GitHub is because we've published it through the marketplace store. So this brings us pretty much to the end. I'm going to open it up if there's any questions out there about web apps or anything else to do with certificates, to do with DNS name. Okay, if there is no other questions, I'm gonna close the call. Thanks a lot for coming, guys. Sorry for the delay in the beginning. There was some technical difficulties, but it's all been fixed. Hope you have a very good day, and bye for now.